Back to the my profile drop down here. A couple of key things I want to point out here that you have access to as the user. First and foremost is going to be the impersonation tool. Now, I will point out this is an admin only tool. This essentially gives you the feature to step into the shoes of one of your users. Let's say maybe they're out or they're tied up with something. Now, upon implementation, we are going to be working very closely with your team and the users that are going to be utilizing our system, as well as trainings and things like that. But you do have access to a lot of these resources here in the My Profile dropdown. First and foremost is going to be our Help Center, where we house a ton of common Q&A, helpful hints, different articles and things like that about the application. You can also take a guided tour here, as well as hop into the Yooz University, which again has a ton of resources. You can also sign up for additional trainings and webinars here as well. Now you can contact our support team here as well, or down here in the bottom right hand corner, just by hitting that button there. As you can see, it's a very quick response time. Typically, we're going to get back to you or your issue in about under 15 minutes. You can also search here for keywords or common FAQs within our very large knowledge base here as well. Now, we do offer a referral program where you can get used for free. But let's hop into my profile and take a look at some of the general settings. Of course, you can change your display name, which language you'd like to choose, and of course, your time zone. But I really want to touch on the delegation system here. Let's say you're going to have Steve out every Friday, right? And you need somebody to go ahead and take over the workload for Steve. You can set a list of delegates here, and you can also set how long you want that delegation period to last as well, just to ensure that these tasks are taken care of, whether that user's in or out of the office. Couple of theme options here as well. I personally like this theme here, so we'll rock with that today. And those workspaces up top, you can definitely align to your preference. But here in the parameters section, this is where you're going to find the notification settings, which are really a key automation feature. They're very customizable. You can set these up to, kind of ping your users, whether those are simple messages or critical notifications. This is where each user is going to be able to personally personalize how they receive notifications, whether that's in the app itself here in the notification center or via email or both, actually. And so that'll do for the My Profile tab. Here, any questions as we just kind of run through some of the general settings? All
I
good,
think we're
all
good.
good. Okay, sounds good. So let's hop back into My Tasks. Like I said, we're going to be spending a lot of time here in My Tasks. You do have access to about 6 components here. I do want to quickly point out the filter tool, which is visible in every piece of the application, where you can search documents by their org unit, their document type, the vendor, or even the date range here. This can also be hidden if you'd like. Now, if you're going to be creating purchase requests within our system, this is where that will take place here with this component here. Any task that you guys maybe have flagged late per your system settings would populate here in the late component. And those tasks that have that 100% completion rate of those header fields and lines would populate here in the complete component, where you can perform those batch functions and things like that. We'll show you that here a little bit later. Now, let's say you have some tasks that maybe you need to put on hold for various reasons. You can block those and they would populate here. Now, in the to-do component here, this is going to be the active user's current task list. And down here in the in progress, you can see any tasks that maybe have been processed by the user, and now they're in someone else's to-do list. And so I want to show you how we actually get documents into our system here. And that's going to be with our capture tool. Now, a lot of my clients, they actually set up maybe an auto forward or a specific email for those documents to come right into Yooz and have the OCR start to do its job. You can set up these specific email addresses with different keywords or even subject lines here to make that process a lot easier. Before the demo, I do want to actually upload a few documents manually for you here. Let me grab those. And we do support drag and drop here for the file upload, I do want to point out that we also support over 15 various file formats as well. And once those documents are actually put into the tool, you can let the AI do its job and select which org unit these docs are going to be for. We'll push it through manually here for the demo, and you want to select your document type. Here we're talking non-PO based invoices. A couple of options here. Real quick, I want to show you what we're uploading first. Now here, what we're going to be uploading is a 16-page document. All of these are invoices from various different vendors. A few things I do want to point out here. For first and foremost, is going to be the Yooz stamp. This is the proprietary rubber stamp that you would kind of place on the front of each invoice, and it would work as a separator to separate that batch of invoices that you're uploading currently. Now, we do also have a tool that is exclusive to the Yooz application, which is the Yooz Smart Split option, where it will actually read through these invoices and it would try to split those for you, offer you split suggestions over here on the right-hand side. And then at that point, you will have the option to confirm or deny that batch or that split before moving forward. A few other things you can do here is by maybe splitting every few pages or so. You can also add in multiple documents and combine those into a single document as well. But everything looks good here. We're just going to go ahead and import here, and we'll give that a couple seconds. Any questions on the capture stage before we move on? All right. So it looks like we're getting an error. Go ahead, John.
No, I'm good.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. So what you're looking at here is we got a little pop-up here. This essentially is the first level of duplicate detection within the Yooz application. It's just saying, hey, we've seen these documents be uploaded before. Of course, I upload these daily for my demos, and so it's just the system doing its job and letting us know, hey, these could potentially be duplicates here. So we'll actually push these through. And I'll go ahead and hit yes there. And once I go ahead and push those through, I come down to my imported files component, and you can see that the documents are currently using, just kind of a play on words here. It just means their statuses are currently being read by our smart data recognition technology in real time. Essentially, this is our OCR doing its work. We've got over 35 years of OCR experience. And so our OCR is looking for the relevant information off of these documents, right? The due date, identifying the vendor for you, as well as the document number. It's going to look through these invoices almost like a human person would. And with that being said, I do want to point out that there's no setup or no templates, and of course, no outsourcing when it comes to our OCR technology. And you'll see that capture rate is fairly high once these are actually done using. We'll give these a couple of minutes though. And while we do that, we'll take a look at some of the settings you have access to as the admin. No questions here, team? All right, let's hop into some of the settings then. So here, if you go into the settings wheel, this is where you're going to have access to those org units, assign those user roles, even those user groups, give those users permissions. This is where a lot of your master data is going to be housed. But I really want to touch on the workflow system here. Any document that comes into the Yooz application can be set on its own workflow. And that's really going to be the key when it comes to automating your process, right? And so I want to touch on the payable invoices side of the workflows. And here, we're uploading these documents now. Those documents that we're uploading, they're going to follow a specific workflow that we've set up in place here from review, approval, all the way up into the payment stage. Now, in the review stage, I do want to point out some of the rules, I guess, we've set up here. We'll go into the no touch rules here. Now, here we're saying if we see an invoice from one of these 10 vendors, that total amount's lower than $550 and that data is complete on that invoice, we're going to just no touch it. It's going to push straight through to approval. If none of those requirements are met, it's just going to default to the account how you guys are normally doing it now for default review. Now, over in the approval side of things, since the text is being fully indexed, off of the invoice and things like that with our OCR. You can even set up keywords here for the system to look for. For example, Francois is our oxygen guy. So if the OCR sees anywhere on the invoice the word oxygen, we know to route that to Francois for approval. Here we're saying if anything's over $4,000, we're going to require multiple approvers. As you can see, we'll go into that secondary approval stage where it'll touch Hillary, and then it'll go over to Mr. Barack secondary. Here's something here. If we have, let's say anything under $50, it's just going to auto approval, maybe something like utilities and something like that. No touch, we'll push it right through. And then if none of those criteria are met, obviously, it's going to default to Mr. Barack for approval. Now, you can add in multiple steps here. It goes up to 9 steps. And you can also add in multiple routes as well. I've seen some very complex workflows, but really the workflow system can be as complex or as simple as you like, depending on what your current process is what we want to adapt to with the workflow system. A few other conditions you can set here. Really, the possibilities are endless when it comes to the conditions here. You can also set up custom conditions as well, just to mimic your current workflow and completely automate your process. Now, this is where I get most of my questions. Any questions on the workflow system for the folks that haven't seen it before? All right, no questions. So we'll hop back into my task and we'll take a look at some of our documents here that have been using. And here we have a few things in our to-do component here. As you can see, we have a few invoices here that are ready to be reviewed. The task is currently to review whether those are non-PO based or even PO based invoices. I created a PO before this demo just so we can see that match happen. But I do want to point out the completion rate indicator here. Now, this is at 100%. It generally just means that all the required fields have a value. There's a balanced GL entry there. And so even though these didn't go through an auto entry route per our workflow that we've set up, these are going to be fairly quick for me to review. And so let's take a look at the first invoice here from General Petroleum, it looks like. Now, as we come into the next stage here, you can see that we have our invoice image here over here on the right-hand side. We've got our headers under the properties, and we also have our GL lines down here at the bottom. I want to just kind of hover over some of the text on this document. You can see in yellow that the OCR was able to pull all of the text off of this document very easily and very quickly. We have a few things highlighted in purple here. That's that relevant information that we're looking for off the document, whether that's document date, due date, total amount, things like that. As I tab through, you can see where it actually pulled that right off of the document itself. So there's a few things you can actually do here. You can block this invoice. You can link this with other documents. You can even leave comments here. I think that was one of the things on the list that we took a look at, Tom and Steve. Can you leave comments on an invoice? You absolutely can. Now, I can point and just bring in the text right off of this document, right into my comment section. Now, if I wanted to just lasso in large bodies of text, I could do that as well here. And even if I wanted to leave a comment for a user on my team, just hit my @ button and it'll bring up my list of users here, and I can leave a comment on this invoice, and that'll stay with this invoice throughout the entire process here. So everything looks good here. I'm going to submit this over. Before I do that, though, I do want to point out the GL machine learning here. We've utilized these 3 accounts for General Petroleum in the past, and so the system is going to memorize that after the first time, right? It's going to know that we've used op expenses 1, 2, and 3 here. There's a few things you can do here as well down in the GL lines that I feel are pretty slick as well, along the same lines as the comments. If I wanted to just add in these couple of surcharges here down in my payment lines, I could do that just by lassoing these in. You can see that the system was able to do the quick and easy math for me here. If I wanted to maybe take it a step further, maybe do some Excel-like mathematical functions, we'll bring in our total. We'll try to balance this GL here. 2448, we'll divide that evenly between these 3 accounts, hit my down arrow. And now we have that balanced GL entry here. Very quick, very easy. We'll go and submit this over now. Let's give it a couple of seconds. Now, you guys seen the workflow, right? This is going to pop up saying, hey, this is going to go to the next step in that workflow that you've set up. This is going to go to Mr. Jones here. You can also leave a comment for him as well. At that point, our next invoice is going to automatically populate. And it looks like this one is from Flag Service and Maintenance. We've got our relevant information extracted right off of this document here. As you can see in purple, as I scroll down, I can quickly see that my balance is over that 4,000 mark that we set up in the workflow stage. And so this one here should require multiple approvers. And that's going to go to Hillary instead of Mr. Jones here. And we'll submit that over. Now, team, we've seen back in the capture stage a little bit of our duplicate detection, but we've got a notification here saying this is potentially a duplicate as well. Now, I do want to point out that as the admin, you have the ability to set the different points of how often you want the system to look for duplicates within the system, but it's allowing me to actually view the document with my own eyes to see if this is indeed a duplicate. So we'll just hit the view the document button. And we'll bring these side by side here. We'll do a quick verification. Looks like we have the same invoice number, same due date, same total amount. This is indeed a duplicate. I can simply just delete this out. We'll go to our three dots and we'll cite our reason as a duplicate here. And then we're on to the next invoice. So I don't believe you guys are going to be receiving any invoices from what we've talked about in the past from foreign languages or foreign countries and things like that. But this invoice is actually from France. As you can see, they do the date a little bit different over there, but the system out the box was able to convert that to the proper date, as well as identify the currency here and convert that to US dollars as well. So this looks good here. I'll submit this over as well. That's going to go to Mr. Jones. Now this next invoice is from Netline. We also have another notification here, and it looks like we didn't pick up the vendor here. So essentially what this means is that Netline doesn't currently exist within your ERP system. Typically, you want to reach out to your ERP admin, have them set it up. This could potentially be a phishing attempt as well. And so we just want to be on the safe side. But let's say you did want to create a vendor on the fly within the Yooz application. I just go to my vendor field, hit my down arrow, hit the plus button. And if I went over to the identification data tab, with Yooz's very large knowledge base, it's going to offer me suggestions here just because it's seen Netline before. And as I go through this info, it looks fairly accurate. Again, we don't recommend doing it this way. This is an option for you. And so in this case, I'm gonna just close this out and we'll just put this one on hold for a little bit, right? And we'll reach out to the ERP admin and have that set up. We'll cite our reason as missing info. We'll close that out. We'll save our work. And we'll
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
So the process that you're following in this workflow is it's coming into an AP, it's non-PO invoices. So the person processing it is checking everything, getting everything right. They're going ahead and expensing it to the GL accounts. And then it's going to someone to approve it. Now, can that approver, if they disagree with one of the GL accounts, can they change it or?
You know, that's completely up to the admin, Steve, as far as permissions go.
Yeah, I had a little color there, Steve. Good afternoon, it's Anthony here.
Afternoon, Anthony.
So yeah, you guys kind of define your workflow, what permissions people have and which step and actions they can take. So if, for instance, you have the ability to oversee and approve every document, and you know the accounting, well, we can adjust the workflow to allow you to make changes to the document in an approval step if needed. But for those that don't have that power, we can also take that away.
Okay, and if someone had a question when they approve it, they could put a note on there that says, hey, I think maybe the account's wrong or ordered this against something. I mean, there could be communication going back and forth.
Yes, they can do that a couple different ways. So if it's an approval step, they can forward the invoice to another approver in the same step, like somebody with the same kind of approval rights, say, hey, is this right? They can send it back a step back to accounting and say, hey, I think you had this wrong. Can you make a correction and leave the comment? I think Scott had showed you a second ago. So the
Yeah.
accountant would know how to fix that. Third, they can send an email from the app right there in that step with the attachment of the invoice. Say, hey, is this coded right? Kind of thing. A couple different ways to handle that.
Okay.
Thanks for a little bit of that color, Anthony. So we're back into my task. We've got one invoice left to take a look at here. This is actually that PO-based invoice from Granger. Now, as you can see in the in progress, the current task here for the next user is to match the used PO against those goods received. We're going to just review the PO match here. As we come into the system, same screen that you guys seen before. But this one is attached to a purchase order. As you can see, it was able to identify that and perform that match here right out the gate with the same PO number here. Now, if you have any open POs, you can just hit this button here. And it'll show you the current list of all open POs there. And so if we submit this over, that'll do for the review stage. And then I want to actually hop into the approval stage. No other questions here? All right. So we'll utilize that impersonation tool to hop into the shoes of our first approver. That's going to be actually Miss Hillary. And as we come in as Hillary, she now has one item in her to do. Looks like it's from that flag service invoice. Her task is now to approve. Now she's going to see the same screen that the previous user was seeing here, but a couple of differences. She can view the properties here, but along the lines of what Steve was asking here, it all boils down to her permissions, right? She can no longer make any edits here under the properties, but she can view them. And again, you can determine those permissions for your users as well. Her submit button has changed to approve, and she could also send this back to the previous user if she'd like as well. And so this looks good here as Hillary. She'll just go ahead and approve this, and that should be it for Hillary.
If they're going through and approving or sending it back, can they add comments and reasoning as why they're doing that on that workflow?
Yeah, so if she hits send back there, she could actually leave a comment there when she sends that back to the previous user as well.
Okay, cool. The other thing I was going to ask you is each person, each step through this process, for each invoice, can you easily tell how many steps it has to go through to get through all the approvals? Because depending on how we set it up, you may have one invoice that requires one approval. Another one may require like 3 because it's for such a big amount. Is it easy to have that visibility to see how many approval steps? Yeah.
So you're asking if as a user you can just kind of see the workflow high level.
Yeah.
That's a good question, Anthony. Could you give me a little assistance on that? Is there a way for the user to see that high level without going into the workflow page?
The workflow itself is once it's set to know which path the invoice is going down. The workflow engine basically works at every step. When Scott was showing you guys the workflow page, at every step, those buckets that contain every rule, what happens is the workflow engine hits that step at the top of that funnel, works its way down, and asks true or false on every single one of your routes. Once it pings true on a single route, it goes that specific way. Now, this can change. There can be ways a workflow can change. One instance would be in Steve's question earlier, what if as an approver, I need to change something on here? And whatever I change the document to actually kind of redirects my workflow, right? Because when he submits it, it goes through that same process again. If there's another step after that, it would then ask true or false in the next step coming up. So to have a user go in and see exactly which way it's going, they would have to actually look at the history of the document to see where it's currently on, but that can change as each person takes their turn approving an invoice. So the end result might be different. So they don't really have a way to look forward on the workflow without looking at the actual workflow list. Now, every user does have an in progress tab, so they can take progress on every spot that the invoice is in, assuming it has not been completed. So that could be a way to put eyes on something, but to be anticipatory about which workflow it's going. If we're setting your automatic workflows based on coding per se, and the person submitting the invoice doesn't necessarily understand where it's going, but knows it would go to, say, for you, Tom, to approve the invoice, they can check their progress to make sure it's going there. But from you on, they can still see it in their progress tab. It's just a matter of, okay, will it continue following the same flow? And they wouldn't be able to look ahead and say it should be going down that route. Once the rules are built, they just work. So that's just something we kind of, I don't think I've had anybody ask for future views of a workflow. So that's a good question. The answer is no at this point.
Same here, Anthony. Thanks, Anthony. Great question, Tom. Any other questions here before we go into our next approver?
I'm good.
All right, all right. So we'll stop impersonating Hillary, and we'll impersonate our next approver, Mr. Jones, which has a few more on his plate than Hillary did. Now, let's hop into this first one here from General Petroleum. Now, I want to point out which Anthony actually just touched on a little bit ago, the audit trail here. If I went up to my clock here and just hit the history here, I have access to the audit trail. And the audit trail is going to really give me an update on what's been going on with this invoice, who touched it, when they touched it, what actions were made here. This is a really good tool here that you'll have access to at every stage of the process. And so we'll approve this. Now, for example, let's say I did need to send something back, right? Maybe we're utilizing the wrong account here. I can send this back with a comment, send that back to review. Let's say we should be utilizing another op expense. And that'll send that back to the previous user. Now, at that point, the next invoice is going to auto-populate here. We won't go through all of these invoices now, but I do want to show you a few of the options here when it comes to batch approvals. If I went up to my complete component here, it'll give me a list of all the invoices that have that 100% completion rate and that are ready to be approved. If I went over to the down arrow, it's going to give me a quick summary of everything attached to this invoice, whether that's the invoice image, the properties, or even the GLs and payment lines here, just for quick and easy access. And so we'll just process these automatically and perform our batch approval. And that'll do for Mr. Jones. And so as we come back in, of course, you guys are going to be looking at Yooz Pay when it comes to the payment side of things. I want to go in as Angela and touch on a few things when it comes to Yooz Pay. We'll impersonate Angela here. Now she has a new task of pay, and as we go into this General Petroleum invoice, you can see here she has the same access, the same view as the other users. Her button has now turned to pay though. And she now has access to the payment lines where the other users did not. And so for example, if maybe she wanted to short pay this, she can make edits here. And she can also leave a comment here as well. And once she hits pay, at that point, if you're utilizing Yooz Pay, your vendors are going to receive an email essentially asking them, hey, how would you like to be paid here? Whether that's direct deposit, email, or printed check. Of course, our virtual credit card option, which we've talked about a little bit, where it's really the most secure and efficient way to pay your vendors. We currently have over 2 million currently that are using the virtual credit card. Once she hits pay on this invoice, a card is going to be generated. It's going to be generated with the exact amount of that invoice, not a penny lower, not a penny more, and it's going to be a one-time use as well for the vendors to go ahead and safely be paid there, and that's essentially how the Yooz Pay feature works. Anthony, do you have any more kind of deeper dives into the Yooz Pay? I'm sure we'll get a ton of questions here on how a lot of that would work.
No, I think you covered it. I think there's some specific questions we'll answer and get into in just a few minutes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll stop impersonating Angela here. I want to touch on some of the search functions you have as we kind of wind down here. Let's say I've been tasked to find drums from a vendor. Not sure which vendor that is. I can simply type in the word drum here, and I'll get a few results. And as I go into those results, I'll quickly note that the word drum is nowhere here under the properties, nowhere here even in my payment lines, but the system was able to pick up the word drum right off of the invoice image itself, which is a really powerful tool. There's a few other things you can do here in the search area. You can, like I said, this is really good for reporting when it comes to multi-criteria search as well. Really, the possibilities are endless here. You can even have custom fields here when it comes to the search functionality. You can save different searches. I've got a few saved here actually already. Now, when I say this is good for reporting, if I went over here to the star, and let's say maybe we're doing audits or something like that, I make changes to this report, I can actually share this with other users as well as notify my teammates whenever there are changes to this report that I'm running here as well. And so great for reporting, great for audits. If you guys have any questions here, I'd love to take them. All right.
I guess you could search by check. You could search by check number and see all the invoices that check or ACH or payment method paid.
I would say so. Yeah. If you wanted to put in a custom field, maybe check number, that could be one of them. You'll get those results there. Go ahead, Anthony.
So yes, Steve, you can search by payment method, payment check number. Check number will display every single invoice that has been paid and or is outstanding for payment against that check number.
And you could view any of the documents associated with it too.
Correct. So can you open up one of these,
Yeah.
Scott?
Yeah.
So here, assuming we've paid this, go down to the payment lines for me on the invoice line. So here is where you would find status of a payment that's been sent for this specific invoice. If you scroll to the right, you'll see a payment reference number. You'll see whether it's been paid, the payment method. There's also a link to the image of the payment. And if you continue scrolling just a bit to the right, are you done? Okay, yeah, then that's fine. Yeah, there can be some additional details that can be made visible as well, but those are kind of the basics for the payment detail that's come in, and you should see that at any time you've made a payment request on a specific invoice.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. And so yeah, great reporting with our search engine. I want to hop over to the stats page. I know exports, you guys aren't really going to be doing too many exports. We are creating that API for JobScope. But the stats page, right? This page is actually built with real data from one of our current customers. They actually have multiple subsidiaries within one organization. Really, this is going to give you the health status update on your current processes here. Now, this user here has a very high success rate, about 95%, which is quite higher than most industry benchmarks, which typically go around 65 to 70%. Now here in the stats page, you can really see a lot with what's going on with your process, how many documents you're currently using, the number of documents currently in progress, the amount of documents that you're processing maybe in a month, which vendors maybe have recognition issues, maybe even your top vendors. You can see any additional KPIs here, maybe how long processes even take here at the stats page here. And so you can really, really hone in for, you know, efficiency, overall efficiency here with the stats page here. And so I wonder, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was going to ask, how much flexibility can you have in this, and do some of these stats, can you drill down to the underlying information? Like, let's just say, for example, you had a stat of invoices approved over 25,000. And so a stat page would pop up and say, okay, today or this week, 10 invoices were approved. And could you click on that and see those 10 invoices?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, Steve, is kind of a Power BI type experience, correct?
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah. So the reports that we have here, the statistics page we have here, you know, these are static reports. You can export the data and kind of go into them. We do have some custom reports that are going to be released here in the next few months that will allow you to build certain things and kind of have that data visualization aspect that you're talking about. So I would imagine fairly soon after we get the API completed and you go live, we'll either be ready to release or probably in late stages of the beta testing there. But yeah, we have data visualization aspects like what you're asking for coming.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so that'll wrap up the demo side of things. I want to use the remaining time to maybe pick Anthony's brain on some of the questions that were posed to us a few weeks back. John Allen, any feedback here? I know this is your first time seeing the application. Let me know your thoughts.
Well, I mean, you're right. It's the first time I've seen it. Steve and I have discussed the concept, and he sort of walked me through that. Not sure that I could go back and replicate your demonstration, but follow pretty much the whole concept as we go along. And I don't know. It looks, it looks like something that's definitely be a powerful tool for us. But as far as the details, I leave it to these guys to ask the hard questions.
Okay. Steve, do you have any questions here? Now that we've wrapped up the demo.
No, the biggest questions that I would have to go into more detail would really be around setting up the vendors. I know you had the one where you said this is how you pay, but I'm sure certain vendors are eventually going to they're either going to be ACH. I would imagine if we run a tool like this, a lot of our vendors would request to be paid ACH.
Okay.
And
Correct.
And I'm sure you could, like we do a weekly payment run. I guess it's what we have to change our terms to say payment run, but I'm sure it's got to be a fairly simple process to do that. I was a little bit confused on the when you did the payment option.
Okay.
Was she actually sending a payment to the vendor, or was that just a notification to the vendor that this invoice has been processed? How would you like to be paid when it's time to be paid?
Yes, I can speak to that. So he was essentially at that point showing or demoing the aspect of making the payment right then and there. But most of our clients, what they'll do is, instead of it saying pay, it'll say export. And what that will essentially do is allow you to batch those payments together and release them as it makes sense, right? So if we can set up, that monthly run like you're doing today, we can mimic that for you, right? So you're not having a change on when your payments go out if you don't want them to change. If you do, obviously we can run with that too. And really it's about what does that run need to look like for you? Okay, because we want to help you batch those payments. We don't want you making individual, especially if it's ACH or check, because we want you to take advantage of not having to make multiple payments to the same vendors in the same month or anything like that.
Okay.
Anthony, so you go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to ask, what information does the vendor actually have access to, if any?
Yeah, so the vendor is going to get notified, hey, here your payments, either if it's a check, we're going to actually mail them the check with all the information on it. If it's ACH or VCC, they're going to receive an email with, hey, your payment's been made via ACH, or here is the virtual credit card. They'll be able to have access to a portal that they can log into if they want to change their payment option, or let's say maybe they were using Bank of America, now they need to go to Chase, right? They can make that change, so they're not having to contact you or reach out to anybody to say, hey, I need to change my bank. Yeah, they can make that change themselves, so you don't have to worry about keeping up with it.
And they'd be able to look up their payment history as well in that portal, correct?
It's a great question. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we'll go verify if that payment history piece is there, and we'll let you know, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the one question, I think we've asked this before, and I think maybe you, or anyway, it is a question I'd like to have answered, even if you can't answer it but I know that I kind of like the feature that the vendor can log in and decide that they want to be paid ACH, and they're in control of making sure that information is entered in and it's accurate. But what happens if for some reason they either enter it in wrong, or someone steals their password and goes in and changes it? Who ends up being responsible for that?
Anthony, is that one that you know, or should we reach out to Sam or Heidi on that?
Let's double check with Heidi, because my understanding, and of course I think the experience is different based on the product. Use Pay Starter is a little self managed for the vendor side, whereas CSI is a little more robust, and they got the portal and the vendor engagement when we start off the project. So yeah, let's get some confirmation there from Heidi.
Okay.
And come back to you with a good answer. Yeah, it looks like there was a couple different payment related questions. Looks like one was basically when paying via ACH, will the name different? ACH name different? I'm assuming you mean on your bank statement, like who the debitor is?
I believe so.
Okay.
If it's to be saying, yeah, Alan, or to be saying Yooz, or
yeah, it would actually be it'd be coming from our account debiting you versus the your ERP's payment provider. Because we make the payment on behalf at the point of when we export your bill to your system. So that's typically how we do in the workflow. So so that would come from us. There's a couple
when you make that payment to out of Yooz, you guys would handle the reconciliation piece of that, correct?
Correct, assuming your system can accept remittance via the API.
Gotcha.
Okay. So what happens is we make the payment request for you. We pay the vendor. We get remit back to Yooz. Okay. Once the payment is in Yooz, we then set up a secondary expert to send back to the ERP to post the payment update. If job scope can handle the remit information via the API, then we send it via the API. If they can't via API, we can potentially send a file instead, if they can handle a file. If neither of those options are available, the payment information would live in Yooz.
Okay.
So let me see. Looking over just the questions, I'm going to answer, kind of focus on the payment ones first. Just bear with me just a sec. New payment vendor. I think we covered that a second ago. ACH. This was actually kind of a good question. So starting to transfer ACH account numbers from vendors that include a step or pop-up asking if the information was confirmed with a representative of your vendor in question. Is that, I think I hear that, or I think that's what this is asking here. So again, this kind of goes with which product we go with and use a little bit. With Yooz Pay Starter, it's a little more self-process for the vendor. We send an email if we have one on file for the vendor, which then the vendor opts into their payment method. We do record back to Yooz which payment method they prefer on the vendor table. So that is visible to you guys. Now, if they want to change that method, when they receive their payment emails that Jared had mentioned earlier, once it's been sent the first time, they'll get updates on the fly. Just, hey, you received a payment for X amount of dollars from Yooz, and here's your remit, right? In that email, there is an option to click a link as a vendor and change their payment method. From there, we record the payment method moving forward for that vendor. On the CSI side, go ahead.
I think what that question is asking is, let's just say we have a vendor that we're setting up for the first time, or it's a vendor that's not really logging into the portal, doesn't want to log into the portal, but we've had communication with them and they want to be paid ACH and they give us their ACH information, and we're, I guess we're keying that information in to use. Can you,
So
can you
on the
put
vendor,
can you put a step in there that says someone has to confirm that, yes, I called so and so and confirmed through a telephone conversation that this is what they want to do, and just so it's documented.
so we can set up a workflow, Steve, that does that. It wouldn't be an automatic workflow because what we could probably do, let me think for just 1 second. So Yooz Pay, when we select the payment method Yooz Pay, that kicks off our payment workflow. We can give a field on the header value that says new vendor. And what happens is if you do the review of data and you choose that value on the header, we can route that to somebody who would be responsible for it on your end. So we can keep the invoice from going any further and make sure that before we actually send a payment, they've opted into their payment information. So your person that we put in that workflow would be responsible for making that phone call. Right.
Okay. All right.
Once they've made that phone call and they've confirmed, they can submit the invoice, and we continue that in the workflow. And once it hits the payment step, by then the assumption should be the vendor's done their thing. You have the info. You can send the payment request. So
Okay.
that could possibly be done. I would say, Scott, we'd probably just add just a header field and call it whatever works for them. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
new vendor or something. Call for ACH, whatever. We can mark that as yes or no. And if they mark it as yes, it goes down the workflow to the person that would need to do that.
Right.
Otherwise, we would ignore that workflow. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's doable. It wouldn't be automatic, like I said. We just mark it. We would know to send it to that person. That person can make the phone call. Now, CSI, when we get a new vendor in Yooz, if you're on the CSI product, the first time we submit the invoice, I think past the entry phase, we automatically send an export to CSI to add that vendor to your vendor profile on the CSI side. CSI, if it's not in their vendor list, my understanding is they reach out on your behalf to make sure that they get the payment method from the vendor.
Okay.
So a couple different ways to handle that. So again, we have two different payment products here, and they're how they interact is a little different for each. So,
Okay.
example of voiding a check. So in Yooz, you can void a check under the My Payments tab. You can do so at any time. I think there was wasn't there a question regarding about how long they'll stay out there if they haven't been paid? No, I don't see that here.
I believe that was a different client.
Okay, sorry about that. They'll stay out there until they take a payment. I think they'll cancel after 90 days of not paying, I believe. So let me see. Voiding or cancel a voucher that has been created. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
What number are you on?
19. Void or canceling a voucher that's already been created. Are we talking about a payment voucher?
Yeah, it's an invoice that's gotten. I guess you just processed the invoice, and now you just need to credit the invoice off for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm struggling with the void factor. But are we still talking about a payment or just the bill itself?
The bill,
The
the
bill.
Okay.
invoice.
Okay. If we enter the bill in Yooz and we don't need it, we can delete it at any time. There is a way to report against deleted documents. However, once it's been deleted, it's been zapped. You can't pull it back. We can always set other fields if you want to use something. Let's say, for instance, we create a field called void, again on the header. When we create a workflow around it that does not export that document, but you want to keep it around so that you know where it went, we can certainly do that as well.
Okay.
Let me see. All right, I kind of went out of order there. My apologies. I was just making sure we didn't have any other payment. I think we covered payment information on the payment lines and running reports against payments. Bank recs and Yooz. Can you 22? Can you do bank recs? Do we reconcile checks that are paid out of Yooz account? What do you mean by bank rec?
And I think that's what we just answered.
Outstanding checks.
Okay. Yep. You can see that. In fact, we can probably help you guys can some of that in the reporting feature. We just need to know the data points, and then we just can that, and you can always just hit that button and you know what's out there. All right. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and go back. So let's talk about 2, which is the MedTel invoice. And let me grab the screen share here, Scott. Just had it up a second. Just had it up a second ago. Let me go find it. Oh, this is too late. Yeah, we'll talk about this one too. Oh boy. Bear with me. Just group this here. My demo is a little less organized than these guys, so bear with me just a second here. Let me find today's invoices. Okay. Back. MedTel. Okay, and this one here. So we actually, you guys do kind of like a front-loaded approval on this one. Is that your process?
Yeah, I think
Before
John
accounting
Yeah,
gets it?
they usually, like John Kirshner approves this invoice, and it goes right now. Some of these could be changed, but right now the way it works is the invoice gets sent directly to John Kirshner.
Okay.
He approves it, sends it to accounts payable to process.
Okay. How does he approve it right now? What is his method of approval? Does he write something on here?
It comes into my email. I download it. I use an editor to put in approved date, and I go ahead and code mine to the cost
here?
center and account. Yes.
Oh, okay. So you
I
actually
added
do
that part in the middle.
You do some accounting?
I used to be. Yes, I have a degree in accounting, but I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
But,
no worries. Not putting you in that box. No worries.
It goes against his budget, and so he knows
Okay.
I know where
know,
I want it in my budget.
Yeah, yeah. We see this in automotive. The parts managers will typically do this themselves, the same kind of way. So, what we can do on this, John, is if we know it's coming from your email, I can create a capture rule around your email that states when it comes from that email, it goes straight to your bucket in Yooz to do the coding. At that point, we'll memorize however you code your MedTel invoices, so you can simply allocate your expenses on your line and submit it. Now, if you need accounting to do a review of your work, we'll control that in the workflow. We'll add an additional entry step. We'll throw this one to accounting when they're done. If you don't need accounting, we can skip that portion, send it to the approval phase. You just define how you want that workflow to look, but it sounds like it'll start for us based on an email coming into Yooz, most likely. And we can identify your specific email via our capture rules. And we can set up a rule based on your email address that puts it directly into your bucket.
Or we could just, contact MedTel and say, hey, start sending these invoices to this. It
Right?
comes in, it gets processed sort of the way that you did it. John gets it. He just makes sure it's coded correctly, and
Yep.
he hits approve, and he's done.
Yep. So John, whichever time, whatever way your time is better spent, we can do either one of those. So if you
Okay.
feel like if you see Yooz working, you don't need to code this, send it to accounting. Accounting sends it back to you. If it's good, you submit it. If it's not good, you send back or you can edit it.
Yeah, because it gets coded to the same GL account every month.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
just so you know how
That makes
I
it real
approve
easy
it
then.
is, yeah, it comes into me. I open up last month's, copy paste, change the date, save it, and send it to accounts payable.
Oh man. All right.
So
Easy,
I
easy
review the
peasy.
bill, but yes,
Okay.
the cut and paste is a simple part.
Gotcha. Yeah, both are pretty easy to do. So no biggie there. Let me see here. What's next? Forgive me, guys. I need new glasses. So we talked about the payment, review expense form, process. Okay, so we take a look at that expense form. I think that one's number 6. Yeah, this one. Okay, this looks kind of similar to how we do our expenses here at Yooz. So let me see, how is document submitting? So you would submit that just like you have here. I have receipts. Yeah, this is exactly how we would do it in Yooz. Is an employee submitting this or is an accounting going to be submitting this?
Uh, it depending on people, and it could be either or.
Okay.
I could see an employee submitting it, or I could see an employee emailing all this, scanning this, emailing it all in, and then maybe someone in accounting putting it in the Yooz system.
Yep. So we can follow the same kind of process. If it's an employee, we can set them up with just capture rights, where all they do is they can go in to use the capture. They can upload all this. In the way we do the process, since we have multiple images, right, for our receipts, what we typically do is we go to capture, we load all those images and our template all at the same time. Then we press the button to combine them into a single document, and you get the end result of what you have here. So your people won't have to do any duplications of work. If they've already scanned their files, they can just go to the capture piece. They can upload all the images, combine them, and then run it through Yooz. Back to the capture rules themselves, we can actually, I think we can combine documents. I'll have to look again really quick. Bear with me. Can we combine? I know we can split them. No, we cannot combine. Okay. So yeah, it would probably be a good idea for them to just to scan all the images, and then when they capture the image or capture them and Yooz, what they do is they hit this to combine them all together, and it creates a single document like we were just looking at in my queue a second ago. Let's go ahead and
And even though it's going to 10 or 12 different account numbers or
yeah,
whatever, I guess you could still do all that.
yeah, absolutely. So on our side, employees are set up like vendors with a, employee ID number being the vendor ID. I know that's probably the same in your system, but when they come in, we'll memorize all your employee expenses the first time you do them for that specific employee. So all you have to do is allocate the expenses and point and click on the sheet. Yeah. Yep, pretty simple. And then workflows, you set up a workflow based on, whoever needs to approve an employee expense. Do they go through HR or do they go through accounting first?
It just depends on the employee. Lots of times it'll go to the supervisor first.
Okay. Then we can set the employee. We can set their manager as an approver in Yooz, and then we can, whenever they submit it, we set a workflow that says if it's employee expense, it goes to that person's manager. They approve it in Yooz. Once they submit it, it can go wherever you want from there.
And I think we had talked about previously too that let's just say it comes into accounting first. Accounting goes ahead and codes everything, and then it goes to the approver, but the approver wouldn't necessarily have to, let's just say it's someone that travels or someone that they're not approving invoices every day, only when someone they supervise produces an expense report, they would get an email notification, correct, that they have something in Yooz that needs to be approved. And from that email, they could click on a link and go right into Yooz and review it and approve it.
Correct. And they can do that on their phone browser if need be. We do have an app coming out later on this year. That's more apps. The app's going to be more like a regular app, but yeah, they can go through their phone browser and they can approve it on the fly.
Okay.
Okay. Utility bills. That's pretty simple. We see kind of the structure of those all the time. Number 6, they don't have an invoice number. Most of my clients typically will use the account number from the bill and a date to make it unique for their ERP. And the account number listed on the bill has to be showed on the payment. Yeah, you can put that in the check comments or the check description or payment description. That can go there if you need that on the remit.
Oh, so you can put information like that in there so that when you send the payment, they have additional information to let them know how to apply it.
Yeah, I believe that's true. Let me double check that, but I'm pretty sure we can send a memo with the check.
I can tell you we can. It does.
Okay.
I've actually seen that. So yeah, it'll go. There'll be a separate piece of paper that comes with a check. It's kind of like a perforated between the check and the remittance information, and then within the remittance information, it's going to have a comment section where it's like, hey, this is for bill, whatever, right, or account number, whatever it needs to be there.
Okay, good.
Okay, number 7, freight bills. I think in the demo, Scott showed you General Petroleum. It's the same kind of process when he was showing you the different departments and splits. So if it's not EO based, right? If you're not sending all that information in a purchase order, then you would simply add, we mirror our UI to include all of your dimensions or cost centers you would use on your line. So whenever you have to split a bill over those cost centers, you would just add your lines, and you would for a second pretend that this is one of your cost centers. You would simply add the values for those cost centers as needed.
Yeah, this is an example where it really wouldn't go to a GL. It would actually be charged to a production job.
Okay.
So to speak. But I guess all of that would just depend on the ability that would all depend on JobScope having an API to be able to process it and use and then have it transfer to JobScope, correct?
That would be correct. Most ERPs, it almost sounds like there's a different behavior than a standard payable, like almost like a purchase order, where I'm not coding it to an account, I'm coding it to a specific something else. This can work in that way. We just need it defined in the export. and also obviously the import from us. So if we call out to job scope and we're going to call us a list of your jobs that are open, we need to be able to pull that into Yooz, and we would have that list on the line, and we would simply code for that list. And then the kicker is, as long as they can take it back, we send it back. The build type may be different. We just need to understand what we send, and we build our export accordingly. So that's why it's
Okay.
important that we get kind of, okay, if we're going to be pulling and sending these values, we need to know where they go. And that's why we need that documentation. But otherwise, that's
Yeah.
how it works with other systems.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's fairly simple. Let me see, going back through my list here. Number 8, validations, invoice accuracy. So what Yooz does is something called trust but verify, right? Trust we're going to do the job we told you and promised. Verify that some of the information is there and it's proper. As far as validators go for understanding what vendor is what, because our OCR will read this document like a human will, the best to its ability, and with a probability of success percentage of 100, right? We look for data points on here to determine, is this specific vendor, right? In this instance, I don't have TQL in my system, so it's a perfect example of a bad read, right? So once we have the proper vendor, and excuse me, I didn't load TQL as a vendor in my system. I'm just using BFF as an example. So with BFF, you can pretend again it's TQL. We have identification data that will load in our system for each of your vendors. And this, when we call your vendor table, we'll pull this in. So basically what we're looking at is the contact information. What I would expect to see on this invoice is exactly what I have in contact for the vendor, okay? If it doesn't work and we do see discrepancies, for instance, if TKL, if QL, if you're dealing with a franchise and you're remitting payments to corporate somewhere else, you may have that corporate address on file because that's where you send your checks. Whereas on the invoice, I got the local branch on the invoice, right? So stuff like that, because we usually don't pass values like addresses and phone numbers back and forth between the systems, as long as I have whatever I'd expect on the invoice, I'm going to get great feedback on my OCR.
Yeah.
We don't
And
template any
see,
of this.
yeah, and this one is a good example because you got TQL and total quality logistics. So it could be, it could be in our system as total quality logistics, or it could be in as TQL.
Well, and that's a good point, because how many companies are we dealing with here that under your umbrella?
Quite a few.
Are each one of them, do they share charts, accounts, and vendors, or are they dedicated for charts, accounts, and vendors?
Oh, when you say companies,
Yeah.
just one
Like set of books.
company.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
So-
just one company.
So
Yeah.
one company, all the vendors. So on the use side, right? You're going to have TQL in there. You're going to have it in there a couple different times. The vendor ID is going to be different, but I may have some different data points that are going to be the same. Maybe the addresses are the same, maybe the phone numbers are the same. In this instance, I'm not going to promise you 100% on these. I'd like to let you kind of make you aware, because the system will take a best guess at the vendor ID. Go ahead.
Well, what about if it's for example, like TubeLight is one of our main suppliers.
Right, we'll look at that.
We do set them up as a different vendor because the payments go to a different place. In Florida versus North Carolina versus.
Yep.
But
So
we always work with them through a purchase order, and that purchase order has the correct vendor number. So with the
I wouldn't.
system.
Yep, I wouldn't worry about that one as much, because if I have unique contact information for the vendor, the OCR has more data points against that vendor ID and to know, oh, okay, I think this is True Light, and then your ID for that location, right?
And it would use the vendor number on the purchase order too to be able to
Correct.
match it up correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you kind of brace yourself a little bit there. If there's, let's say this vendor had the same address and phone number for the 6 different entities you deal with in that vendor, then we have to look for specific identifiers. Unfortunately, in Yooz, we're talking about probability of success. Let's look at this. So this red ribbon here lets me know I don't have a lot of information for this vendor. So this is a good example. Let me get into the idea again. So I'm going to open it up. So as I'm coding an invoice the first time, I would even stress during training for you guys, Steve, for these specific vendors, hey, let's make sure we have good contact information. But more importantly, there's two IDs here. All right, there's an OCR identifier 1, OCR identifier 2. These add to our percentage of probability to make sure that I have the right true light. So I think in your example earlier, you had a unique account number for those. We could potentially use that, assuming it's on your invoice here.
Okay.
Okay. So is it going to hit on these 100% of the time? I'm going to say, honestly, probably not. So what we do in that instance is if the vendor misses, we simply change which vendor we need and we continue with our day. If there's a PO involved, then we attach the PO and we're good to go.
Yeah, because if you got the wrong vendor, you're not going to be able to find the PO.
That's
So-
absolutely correct. So if we see it and we know that it's off, we can change it. Just a click. So did this answer kind of your question on
Yeah.
these?
Yeah.
Okay. Any system out there will struggle with that, whether it's human, human aided or like ours, which is 1000% machine. They will struggle because the human aspect won't know unless they read it, or even if they do know and know your accounting, it's going to take you a day or two to get this invoice back to process.
But
So,
it's still an easy fix because it's still going to read the invoice number, the amount, the invoice
Right.
date, those types
Right.
of things. You just got to go in and maybe
Right.
change the vendor number, and
that's
then you're
that's exactly what I would do. I would just key in for whichever vendor I need, and I type that horribly, but I think you got it. Well, I don't have a 7885, but anyway, yes, we have your vendor list loaded, and you can just change that real quick. Let's see. So validators, and then the second part of that question is for, well, maybe it wasn't in that question. I thought there was a duplicate. There's a duplicate question. On our invoices here, every time the task runs for the invoice to go from a specific step to the next step, it's checking all the data on the document. And when it pings for a match of certain data points, it will then flag it as a duplicate. So that actually starts at the capture function. When you import a file, Yooz will actually look at the file names that you're bringing in. Okay. And what it'll, in the first level, it'll look at that and say, hey, I think I got one earlier that said Duke Energy -1.pdf. I think this might be a duplicate. So it'll kind of stop there. Or when we were capturing documents earlier, I think Scott had one flagged instantly because he had already uploaded it and it was pinging as a duplicate. So that's the first step. But if I go in and I go in and let's say I get that alert, hey, I think this is a duplicate. I upload the document. When I submit it, the system looks for 5 different data points to match. The company that is loaded for, vendor ID, date, dollar amount, invoice number. When I get a match in all of those, I halt and we don't allow it to go anywhere further. And it will do that every time you submit the document. So literally it's double checking for duplication all the way through your workflow until we export it. And then my assumption is if it's already loaded into Procore and Procore has duplicate detection and they can send us back a status on that, like saying, hey, Yooz, don't send it, it's already here. Then when you try to submit it, it will not allow an export. I don't know if that functionality is in Procore, but if it is, then we write for it. That way, when the user submits it and it errors, they know why it errored because it's already there. Okay.
okay.
Let's see, bunch of supplies, vendor on hand, replica inside. The number 9 was kind of interesting. So when we send a purchase order, let's say we open it up for 10 widgets, and let's see, there's a consignment on the PO number. That's fine. It will read that. And yeah, that's okay. We can allow for special characters and text in a PO number. So that's fine. Let's see, I think he covered workflows. Really with the workflow conversation, guys, the hardest part of any project, just as an FYI, is you guys defining your workflows to us. We usually have a template that we send out that you guys can kind of document it. It basically, the one I use will have criteria from the application that you can select on your columns, and the work engine works on it. If this, then that. If the data exists in this way, then it goes through that workflow. You just define it to us, and we build it accordingly. And then we show you where they are, how they work, and how you can set them up moving forward.
I know, Tom, I know way back when we first talked, you were kind of saying that you didn't really have a true approval piece, but we're going to give you one. So you can have that accountability you were looking for.
Right. No more lost invoices.
Exactly.
Yeah, you do get to see them all through the workflow. I was trying to see if I had a kind of like a sample so I can kind of get your thought going around it. I can maybe send it to you guys a little bit later. I don't want to bog down the meeting.
Now, what kind of problems do you see that Yooz solves for most of your customers once they implement it?
Jared, do you want to handle that one?
Yeah, sure can. So the biggest things that we see is definitely reduction in manual import of data, right? So all the manual effort of typing things in, doing all that work. One of the things I think when we were first talking with Tom, he was kind of going through like, here are our needs. I was kind of saying, well, Tom, like you just sold yourself on our product, right? Because we're going to help you with your approvals. We're going to give you accountability. We're going to give you view into everything you need to see. We can manage all the different locations, so you don't have to worry about what's going on at one location versus another location. You can have visibility into all of it and be able to see that. You can do the PO match. You don't have to worry about, hey, I've created a PO, I've gotten approvals. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? We can do that PO match for you. And I think that's kind of specific to you is you have all these project managers that need to be involved in the process now, right? That need to do those approvals on some of these invoices that are coming in. And those are some of the things that we can help solve for.
I know when we talked to Ben Steger, I believe, is that his?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They were, it was a really good reference because they have multiple locations too.
Yes.
And he said by having all the invoices coming in to Yooz, he said their collection calls just dramatically decreased because they were constantly losing invoices, or they were sitting on someone's desk, or someone loses an invoice, or he just said it really dramatically decreased all of those issues.
I'm gonna tell you a story, Steve, and I'm gonna tell you something I think that will matter to you because some of the conversations that we had. The story of Ben Seeger. So absolutely, like the Yooz application helped and changed their life so much that Ben actually is probably one of our best sales reps. It sounds funny because he doesn't work for us, but Ben will go to conferences. He'll see us there. He will walk over to our area, and he will bring people in, and he will talk about what this does for him and how it can help them, because that's how much it changed his life and has bettered their situation. But I think the other piece, I know cost is a big deal to y'all, and one of the pieces we haven't talked about that I think will kind of help and may light up for a little bit of y'all, when we're creating this job scope API, we have a referral program, right? And that referral program, we want to actually, y'all to be the next Ben, where you're able to go out there and say, hey, like this has helped us so much. We think that you should have a conversation with Yooz. And when you do something like that and you send us clients, our way, we're going to get you something in return based on that referral program that we have that will actually help reduce the cost of the Yooz product, because I know that cost is a driver. So Yooz is very friendly with their clients in regards to, hey, if this has changed your life and you feel like there's someone else out there that it will also help them, send them our way. Right? We'll reward you, we'll reward them, because we feel like everybody deserves this automation capability, and we want to deliver it to more people. So That's just one piece I want to throw out there, Steve, because I know cost was a huge discussion that we've had over the course of the last few months, right?
Yeah.
All right, I know we got about 4 minutes left for everybody. So I just want to take 1 or 2 more minutes here. Question 11 regarding status or manually put invoices on hold for vendors when you're waiting for sub info. Yeah, we can build workflows around it, or in our ability to block an invoice when we're coding it. Let me go back to an invoice. We can set up blocked reasons that are specific to you guys. So in the demo, when we show this, it's canned, right? We can set up a blocked reason. We can put one in here that says waiting on sub, and you can put a comment in here regarding, whatever you're waiting for. And what'll happen when you close this out is it saves that. Actually, let me go ahead and just add a reason real quick. We'll put in dispute, waiting for something, and I'll close this and I'll hit yes. And what it does is it will actually take that, and you see my counter just went up by 1. It put it in a block status. So when I go in here, I can see it's blocked and why it's blocked and who did it.
And this is kind of what I was, kind of thing I was referring to earlier is, let's just say there's 10 invoices that are in that blocked status.
Mhm.
I could go in and like, you could go in and pull that in. Can you pull that invoice up and just see what it is? I mean, it says
Yeah,
waiting on.
absolutely. Absolutely. So if you're admin, in fact, we can probably report against a status equals blocked or dispute or whatever, and you can run a report on that. So you can see anything that's waiting on something. We can can those reports for you.
Yeah, and so that was kind of like if you have certain types of invoices that you don't need to be in the approval process, but you just want the, whenever they pop up, you just want to kind of review them from time to time. You could set something like that up, give it
Yep.
and just go in and review them.
Yep. Or if you had, let's say you have a specific person on point for your subs, right? So I'll just keep an eye on that information. If you want to have accounting code these up and set it in their queue to approve, then they could be there waiting. Once they get that information, whatever your internal process is to get that. Actually, I'm sorry, it would be typically to code that, right? We would add it to the,
Mhm.
okay, so never mind. We probably want to take care of it in entry phase. I think easiest would be just set up the different reason and have it there, and you can report against it
Yeah.
at any time.
And I think you mentioned that in the workflow, if someone's not responding to something, uh, there you can have notification, like their supervisor can
Yep.
get notified that, hey, Joe's had an invoice for whatever we set it for, and they haven't processed it. You
Yep.
may need to get involved.
So in the system, we actually will tell you, you tell us how you want your processes for notifications to be, and we set it for that. So for instance, in my demo, I have the late turned off, but basically when we come here and we turn it on, you tell us, hey, for a number of days that a task essentially will exceed, when do we mark the invoice late? And when it is marked as late, you do see that status in the task. You'll see the alert, it'll say late. And you can flag it
Okay.
for reporting. So
Okay.
once it goes to late in the user table, you define a specific person's manager. So that person would be alerted when the workflow's task has gone late. So yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Alert or escalate, right, Anthony? They can escalate.
Yeah,
You can actually
either
have it escalate to their manager if you want them to.
either or. I prefer just the alert because of accountability.
Mhm.
What I mean by that is if I know at some point as an AP person, and I'm not the best at my job, that somebody is going to automatically take care of this. If I don't, escalations are fine, right? From an automation standpoint. But for accountability, I prefer just an alert and making those people, hey, when I see this late, I'm going to reach out to you and go, hey, why isn't this done? But up to you guys. Either way works. We can also set up an automatic escalation where a manager can jump in.
Okay.
Yep. Pop-ups. Yep, I think we kind of covered that. Dashboards for various users. I think we kind of covered that. The user KPIs are on their way with reporting. Customer portal number 13, not yet. It is on its way on the Yooz side for a customer portal. Let's see, vendor and job scope, payment method, we covered that. ACH for 16, scam we covered. Adding documents, invoice size limits. Okay, so for the files coming into Yooz, there's a couple different limits to kind of be cognizant of. Emails already have a built-in size limit of 36 megs, and that's typically based on the email provider. It could be less or more depending on your email provider. Okay, I think Outlook's like 36 megs per email. Now for Yooz to capture those, 14 megs, I believe, is a cap per file. So you can have a 36 meg email that has 36 megs worth of attachments. Each one of those attachments cannot exceed the 14 megs. So if it's bigger than that, my suggestion would be to drop those bigger files on an FTP site, which we can supply for capture. I have captured a 50 meg file via FTP. That was quite a few hundred pages. So if you get bills that big, just kind of keep that in mind. In the manual capture process in Yooz, I think it's we set that at 20 megs. I think we can adjust it UI side though. We can up or down it.
Okay.
Do you ever get an 800 page email or 800 page invoice?
No.
Okay. Okay. Gosh, all right. If you did, let's get PowerPost on this app.
And I think that may have been a question regarded around, like, one of the things our subcontractors do is we're supposed to get completion photos of the work that they did.
Okay. Yep.
And I'm just thinking you could have a situation where they're emailing the invoice with some completion photos.
Yep. So in that instance, lower the resolution on the photos. Instead of taking an HD photo, take a standard photo. Might be one suggestion. It might be hard to tell them to do that, right?
All right.
Let me think of another way around this. So if they're emailing it in, if
I
they
guess
send,
and the completion photos don't have to be attached with the invoice. I guess you could put a process in place for somehow the person that needs those photos to get them, and you could take them out of the, I guess the email.
you would just either the person could capture them as an other document type with their phone and load them, and then accounting could attach them to the bill. We can set up a couple different ways. Probably set up even different folders and use. We call an org a different. So here, I'm sorry, I'm talking in circles. Let me clean this up. So our companies in Yooz are orgs, but essentially what it is a big folder, right? It's a folder of a whole bunch of stuff. So we have different clients that we can set up different folders for, or an org, if you will, that doesn't do anything other than document management. We can report back against stuff that goes in there. So good use cases is statements. We don't code a statement typically, but you want to put somewhere where you don't have to go file it in a cabinet somewhere. Then we create a folder called statements. And you can upload your folders there, right?
And you could go back and look at the last 12 statements if you wanted to, right?
Absolutely. So what I would do in that
Okay,
instance is
great.
I'd create a folder with your statements. I'd mutualize that folder with your vendor data. And then what happens is when you capture it, we don't code those for accounting. We just kind of have some open fields there where we look for the vendor information. We'll pull that in the header. If there's anything else you want to capture, you can just edit some. We can add some fields, and then you can report back against it. So that's kind of an additional use case for that.
And then you just save that in the org folder for that vendor. And I guess you're saying you could do that with the pictures too. You could just save the pictures in the org folder.
We could have a thing called, pictures if you want to. They can load it up with the vendor ID, and they can search back and see that they got the pictures for the job if you don't want to attach them to the bill. Do you actually save those bills in Procore? You save the images, or is that you putting those somewhere else?
No, not in our ERP system. No.
Okay. So where are the pictures going after they've been sent in?
Might be a Tom or a John Kirshner.
I think we just
person.
store them on a server.
Server? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll count it as a document if you load it. You know, again, a bunch of pictures. Up to you guys, you know, if you want to continue eating server space. I don't know. We kind of think around that, but any case, we can upload them, we can attach them. If there's any specific you want to do outside of that, just let us know. We can probably accommodate it.
Okay.
Let me see. Approval perspective. So I can't really do walking through an SSO login because are you guys on Okta or AD, Azure AD?
We use AD.
Okay, so AD, you go into the AD portal and you select Yooz, and you go through the process of connecting the Azure AD SSO on your side, and then everything on that side is controlled from basically by you guys, since it's already in the AD workshop, or whatever you call it. What do they call it on that side? Like the vendor partner portal or whatever, since we're already registered with AD. So I can't really demonstrate somebody logging in through that process in a demo.
Okay. Okay.
But it just basically for us, we also have SSO. So whenever we log in, I have to make sure I'm on 365 in order to get access to my Yooz app. And then you know, I wouldn't have access to this otherwise. So let's see. SSO payment information covered, bank recs.
Hey,
Yep.
I've got to run to another call real quick.
Yep, I
y'all are over
think
my
that
head
was
at
it.
this point anyway, so appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll all be back in touch and figure out what next steps are.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Allen.
Thanks,
Thank you
John.
very much for your time.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, yeah, I think that covers everything on the list here, guys. If there's anything we missed or anything that we could clarify further, don't hesitate to reach out to Scott and we'll get the answer. So from
Okay.
my end,
Yeah, just
Tom.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
just don't forget about the question I asked about like an ACH payment. If somebody's changed it and someone stole their password and they got in and changed it, you know, how would that get resolved?
Yeah, let's get with Heidi on that, Scott. You got that down?
Looks like Jared already posed the question in the chat. And so we're waiting for a response now. I'll get you guys an update here, hopefully today or tomorrow on that.
And then Tom, I think you saw my email today regarding to Adam over there at QA.
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah. We'll probably have to
Tom.
get a meeting with you guys and Dynamic Quest and just finalize everything and get everything set up.
Yeah, kind of figured. Just let us know. Morrow isn't back till I think midweek next week, and Wednesday, I'll be traveling next week. So Scott, you could probably facilitate a call with Morrow and get Justin involved if you have to from pre-sales.
Yeah. Okay.
That way we can get that squared away because I mean, from our side, guys, we can build anything. If we have the documentation, we can build it. I just need the documentation. I need to know where the endpoint is, you know, and how we're going to connect. I think we have the idea for connection, but if it's something via VPN, I mean, if there's no way around that, we might be dead in the water here, guys, and have to go with a SFTP.
I'm sure we'll find something.
Okay. Sounds good, team. Appreciate everyone hopping on. Anthony, special thanks to you for getting a lot of clarity on some of the questions we had. Tom, I know we talked about touching base here at a later, maybe tomorrow. And so just feel free to give me a call, reach out, and we'll talk next steps.
That's perfect.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
All right,
thanks,
guys.
everyone. You guys have a great evening.
Thanks. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, guys. Thank you.